In exhorting the women of India to stop settling for what she calls, and I quote her now, boring dal-chawal sex when life can offer spicy, finger-licking chicken chili fry, best-selling author and columnist Shobhaa Dé is appending sexual shibboleths in her latest book, The Sensuous Self, Explorations of Love, Sex and Romance. Her 28th book is her prescription to get over the humdrum notions of intimacy and romance. From invoking Kalidas, arguably India's greatest playwright, about erotica, to offering her own insights accumulated over decades as an astute observer of urban India, Day's book has been well received. She spoke to MCR from Mumbai. Welcome to Mayank Chhaya Reports, Ms. Day. It's always a great pleasure to have you.
Thank you. Looking forward to our interaction.
Oh, thank you, sir. That's lovely of you to say. I must put it out right there that I haven't read the book. I'm just basically flying blind, but I have a fair amount of idea what the theme is about. So I hope you don't mind my broad questions.
Not at all. Let's go for it.
Okay. You are exhorting women to stop settling for boring dal-chawal sex and go for spicy, finger-licking chili chicken fry kind of sex. While that's self-explanatory, tell me a bit more about the distinction that you make between the two.
Well, I think what is termed as duty sex in other cultures and communities is what women are expected to perform, particularly in arranged marriage situations, but also in romantic situations where they don't have much agency over what they would prefer. So the reference is to really encourage them to discover their own potential as partners who will be enjoying the lovemaking process as much as their male companions, partners, husbands.
Yeah, but I mean, when you say that you're assuming a certain degree of freedom in a large population of women, which unfortunately doesn't exist even now to the extent that we are talking about. So how do you get around that problem?
No, it's tough. It's a big challenge because what is also encouraging is that thanks to social media, a lot of our women in smaller town Indias and the villages of India are finding self-expression through the TikTok videos that they are making, the reels that they present themselves in various forms of fantasy. And therefore, I think they're asserting themselves and their rights to be who they are, to be themselves. It's a big step forward because for decades, years, centuries, women had no such platform to express a view, to express an opinion, to just be out there and maybe enjoying themselves.
Right. Levity aside, India has had a multi-millennial history of a very open and enlightened approach to sensuality. Uh, and let me just read a passage from Vikramavarshiyam by Kalidas, which I read frequently. Just one line where he says about Urvashi, नितंबों के भारी होने के कारण धीरे धीरे चलने वाली. Now, this is 1600 years ago, 4th century current era. I mean, if we were that 1600 years ago, what happened in the interim?
I'll tell you exactly what's happened in the interim. We have a rich tapestry, a rich history of a very sensuous past in India. We've celebrated all the senses. We've celebrated pleasure through poetry. Kalidasa, who you just quoted, I've quoted extensively in my book. But apart from a lot of the chapters begin with Kalidasa, end with Kalidasa. So the idealized lover, as represented in Meghdut, that a cloud can be your messenger with the most poetic messages that the cloud is bearing to your loved one is in itself so inspiring. What happened subsequently is that the British came. Till the British arrived on our shores, we were very much aware and in touch with our legacy, and it was celebrated whether it's on temple sculptures, painting, art, music, our spices, the way we dress, the way we actually live our lives, day to day lives. But there was no restrictions of this kind. There were no inhibitions that came when the British decided to impose their own very Victorian moral code on a very unsuspecting but a very large population of their subjects.
We are 7.5 decades past the retirement of the British from India. And you interestingly mentioned the rise of social media and how it is impacting even small town and villages where young women are able to express a lot of their fantasies. I would be very interested if you explore that a little more because that's something that I've been noticing in all these videos that you see on a regular basis. These are
Yes.
not necessarily erotic, but you can see the quest to come out and express from that standpoint.
There's a huge difference between what a lot of young people may confuse with out there behavior for reels and what I am seeing because I watch a lot on social media just to understand the change in the country. The reels that I am referring to are from the smallest villages, whether it's in South India, the Northeast, from Bengal, from Maharashtra, from up north, UP, Bihar. A lot of the women look, certainly they look underprivileged. They are shooting these videos by placing their phone cameras at an angle placed on a mud floor. And quite often they're dancing in front of their own very modest homes, huts, in fact, and they're dressed in their everyday wear. They probably don't have the resources to dress up for their reels, but what they're doing is mimicking a lot of popular culture, the songs that they see, whether it's Bollywood songs or from Bhojpuri cinema, some of those songs, or from the South Indian cinema, which is very rich in the way they picturize songs and dances in their movies. And they're doing it without any inhibition.
Correct.
Certainly, they're putting them up. They're putting them up because they're looking for those responses and getting them. But I often wonder and worry how they manage to explain their popularity to in a very conservative society to their own maybe husbands or the men in their family, brothers, fathers, society at large, sarpanches. I don't know how they negotiate that.
The sense that I get from what you're saying, Ms. Day, is that the second sexual revolution, intimacy revolution, romance revolution, whatever you want to call it, will be led by women, especially young women of India. Is that the right sense?
Absolutely the right sense because they are driving this revolution. And I'm talking about not just the ladies I spoke about a few minutes ago, but a lot of young professionals in our cities, a lot of educated young girls who have suddenly found a new kind of way to express their desire and also are not constrained by probably what my generation and one generation after mine, of conforming to family standards or societal standards of what a well brought up young lady should be saying or doing or even sharing so openly across so many social media platforms. But they're doing exactly that. And that's making society pretty uncomfortable. That's certainly making men sit up and think. So when I was referring to dal-chawal and so on, it was not just a metaphor. It was not just symbolic. It was just saying that the change has happened, and those women who are still performing their duties should at least be able to be in a position to spice up their own duty bound and dutiful boudoir encounters. And there are many ways that I've suggested in the book where they can do exactly that.
It's an interesting distinction you make between duty sex and sex for little more than that. genuine personal pleasure. Is that a consciousness that is creeping in among young people now?
Very much so, because in the past, they were programmed to believe, especially young women, that their sole job in life was to produce, procreate and produce an heir for the family. And the joys of that procreation were never shared by anyone, their family elders or their mothers or older sisters or aunts. They were just sort of thrown into the deep end on the wedding night and they had to sink or swim. Well, if they had to swim, they had to learn very quickly that what could be a very traumatic night for a very young, untutored bride who is there to also to prove that she's a virgin. Because when you talk about pavitrata, when you talk about purity, that the bride has to be pure, usko pavitra hona chahiye. There's only one explanation for it, is that she has to be a virgin.
Right.
And to prove that her hymen is intact, the bride has to bleed and has to establish that to convince the rest of the family that she's come into their family as a very pavitra, chaste woman.
Uh, Intimacy requires a measure of privacy, which in the Indian context may be particularly tough. Just take Mumbai where you live. Couples seeking intimacy have to do it almost as if they're about to commit some heinous crime. How do you get around this rather practical problem that a lot of Indians face in terms of personal privacy?
It's a very interesting question, because there is something very surreptitious about intimacy, and that's directly linked to the lack of physical space. Despite that, there is a very delicate system in place in joint families also, not just people who live in under shelters on streets, but still produce children. There is some sort of a code, I'm sure, that allows a young couple, a few moments of privacy, a few moments of amorous play, because I see that families accommodate young couples in ways that are ingenious, that maybe other societies would find completely baffling as to how you can steal that kind of private time. But they do manage to do it. And that in itself is a small miracle.
I didn't think of that in terms of families affording their young ones a measure of privacy that they need.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. You write that sensuality has no expiry, which is, of course, true, but it often gets appended by societal factors. I mean, people past 60, past 70 almost feel awkward, guilty, coy about seeking physical intimacies. Do you see that as a problem, or you think it is changing?
No, it is definitely a problem, because it's a question of, again, how society brands seniors. And the thought that maybe seniors also have a desire is almost obnoxious, or it's something that is repulsive, revolting to a lot of people, and within family too. You're almost condemned for having thoughts which are, according to them, prurient thoughts. And physical intimacy at a certain age, after 60s, is considered not decorous behavior. But a lot of older people find a great amount of comfort. They don't have to be panting, heaving, and shoving, but intimacy goes well beyond that. And when I say there's no expiry date for desire, I absolutely mean it. I mean, desire never dies. You still have your imagination, and your mind is capable of fantasy and of also having all kinds of wonderful flights that can take you to different places, erogenous and otherwise. It doesn't always have to be copulation. It can be much more than that.
Interesting you should mention it because in 1985 there was a sexology conference in Bombay. And I was talking to June Reinisch, a very well known sexologist from here, the Kinsey Institute. And the question that I had asked her was, must copulating couples reach an orgasm, because the conference was about orgasm. And she thought that it was remarkable that that question was raised. What is your view on that? Orgasm is not necessarily the destination of copulation.
I've said it in the book as well. It's not the end all and be all of copulating couples. You can be in a love making situation which does not necessarily peak. And it doesn't have to peak for it to be pleasurable to both parties. And that's maybe the orgasm itself is so overrated. We give so much importance to it. It's like it's a goal that has to be reached, that has to be achieved, or you consider yourself a personal failure for that night at any rate because you have not managed to achieve it, or you have not managed to get your partner to achieve it. Both these are fallacies, should be thrown right out of the window. There are many other ways of feeling desirable and sexually aroused and sexually satisfied without necessarily reaching orgasm.
Absolutely. What has been your experience in terms of how young Indians view sensuality now? Because there are countries like Japan, for instance, where it's a serious problem of young Japanese having completely given up any notion of sex, romance, lust, all of it. What's happening in India from that standpoint?
We are heading there surely, but slowly as compared to Japan, because Japan is a much smaller country. India, the young are too restless, too much in a hurry, too preoccupied with themselves. And the idea of intimacy itself doesn't appeal to the young. It's spreadsheets over bed sheets. And they almost have to schedule a time for lovemaking, if at all they want to. And most of them don't seem to want to because their energies are expended elsewhere. And romance, the question of romance is shrinking. The whole idea of courtship, the rituals, the beauty, the delicacy of getting to know one another, holding hands, even that is something that they don't care about. Endearments, love poetry, none of it. And I feel perhaps it's a transitional period. Maybe they'll come back to it eventually. But as of now, there is no time whatsoever for any of the frills that accompany. Well, what can I call it? I can't call it love making because there's very little love involved. And competition is that's not their objective to start with. So whatever it is that they're doing is very transactional and very mechanical and devoid of any investment of time or their persons.
This is rather ironic because India is unique in the world in terms of thousands of movie songs, particularly Hindi movie songs, articulating intimacies in profound ways. I'll just cite two examples from the 1958 film Kala Pani. Majroor Sultanpuri writes in one of the antaras, "Jo main hoti," I mean, think about this, "Jo main hoti raja bela chamelia, लिपट रहती राजा तोरे बंगले पर." Now it's such a lovely expression about love. Again, in Dilek Mandir, Shailendra writes, "Aaj Chandni ki nagri mein armanon ka mela." In the moonlit night, there is a festival of desires. What a lovely little expression. Despite that, how is it that we are losing that?
Well, the lyrics of today, which are popular lyrics, they're mainly dance tracks, which people can dance to during sangeets when they're really drunk and out of their skulls with excitement and just having so much alcohol and a good DJ playing for them. So the lyrics are more rhythmic. They have very little poetry in any of them. They don't necessarily even rhyme or make any sense. And they certainly don't celebrate romance in the way the old lyricists were all poets. And they wrote beautiful shairis, and they were fortunate enough to combine that talent with music directors who had the finesse and the taste to combine classical music with a few modern maybe beats to it, but it wasn't what it is today. Today, I think that the deterioration really started with Ek Do Teen, Char Panch Chhe Saat, as you remember. Javed is very proud of that song, but a poet of such high caliber as he is, I'm surprised that he's proud of Ek Do Teen, but he is. These were sort of nonsense lyrics, nonsense poems making no sense. So but today, whether you hear something like a thamma thamma or that's what it is. It's basically music that the lead female star can gyrate to very suggestively and displacing in the process the legitimate item girl or the vamp who used to fulfill that particular role very effectively in earlier cinema.
What's been your experience as somebody who has written this book in terms of people responding to the fact that A, you are a woman of some standing, and B, you're of a certain age? Do people factor those things in and said, who is she to advise us?
So far, not at all. The book has been embraced across generations, which has pleased me no end because I really wasn't sure what the reception to it would be because it's not a nudge nudge wink wink kind of a book. It's not a book that is designed for titillation. It's designed to encourage conversations around a subject which, for whatever reason, everyone sort of feels uncomfortable, almost squeamish about tabling. So my experience at the Lit Fest and the interviewers and the reviews has been so far so positive that I'm really very elated. I didn't expect it at all.
That's wonderful. Do you believe that there is perhaps a need for any government, whether state or federal, to sort of build this into the health aspect of life? Sex is part of human health at the end of the day. Do you think that India needs to weave that into its policy?
Excuse me. Well, we do have extensive sex education curriculum. In most schools, they have it. It's almost mandatory at every level. But it's technical, it's academic, it's explaining about the birds and the bees in a very dry, matter-of-fact way with diagrams. And it's not encouraging the students to ask questions which may puzzle them or confuse them. It's not encouraging a classroom or we should have many more workshops, even for young adults, and mainly for young men, because what they have imbibed is an awful notion of what they consider macho behavior. It's like alpha male behavior, and that is endorsed and indoctrinated from a very young age. That you have to conquer a woman. It's always got to be a conquest of some kind. And sex is seen in a very combative way by the young men of India, and I'm sure young men in other cultures as well. That conversation needs to be changed, and that conversation can only happen when there are professors, teachers who can guide young minds through a difficult phase in their own lives when their hormones are on fire and they have no one to turn to.
The advent of social media has meant that young men and women have very easy access to all kinds of pornography. Now,
Yes.
while pornography does serve a purpose to a limited extent, it also twists a lot of minds in terms of what they expect from their partners. Do you think that's a problem in India?
It's a huge problem, and I see it as something that again we have swept under the carpet because we don't quite know how to deal with it. But there's no way one can actually deny access to hardcore pornography, given how completely accessible it has become to even very young children. So the potential of the damage that can inflict on young minds is immense. At the moment, I don't have a solution. I don't know how one can possibly rectify the situation, but one can always address the issue of the problems that it can create at any and every opportunity that public figures find themselves in where their voices will be heard.
And to conclude, how would you like to be courted now as opposed to when you were in your 20s?
Nothing has changed. I'm still a die-hard romantic at heart. I'm still a very passionate woman. I'm very lucky to be married to a man who's even more passionate than I am and who's far more imaginative too. And the thought that I'm in my late 70s, he's in his mid 80s, I don't think that has stopped either of us from expressing our feelings or our desire for intimacy in whichever manner we can now fit that requirement without stressing too much over it. So nothing has changed. I still would love the flowers. I still love great food. I still love great conversation. I still appreciate a lot of finesse whenever we are together, and that is timeless courtship. That should we should never lose track of that.
On that note, many congratulations, Miss Day. I hope it
Thank
becomes a
you.
whopping bestseller and you
Thank
make a
you.
lot of
Thank you.
money.